Hi, and welcome to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm Ange, MacCabe, CEO and co-founder of Intuitive Performance. I'm a performance coach, HR professional, whole person leadership facilitator, and your host. The Human Side of Business podcast is fueled by the genuine curiosity to understand how personal characteristics and skills can be leveraged to drive individual and team performance, tangible outcomes, and ultimately organizational success within business. Each podcast is devoted to sharing knowledge, expanding our learning edges, and exploring the trends in corporate culture towards growing the emotional intelligence of organizations. I'm so glad you're here. Hi, and a warm welcome to the Elevate Business podcast. Both myself, Ange MacCabe, and Scott Russ are your hosts. We have the pleasure of introducing you to Scott Ward, who is the founder of HabitStack, as well as a certified executive coach. Scott loves building software products and helping people succeed with their startups. Since 2009, Scott has been experimenting with ways to help startups reach their potential. HabitStack is a methodology and a software tool designed to help ambitious teams get strategy done. Hi, Scott. Welcome to the Elevate Business podcast. We're so happy you're here with us today.
Hi, Ange. Scott, good to be here. I'm really excited that we can spend some time together.
Yeah, likewise. So we know you in the sense of HabitStack and the great things that you're doing to have impact on goal setting and its impact to leadership and culture. But tell our subscribers a little bit with regards to a little bit about your company, your role, and the passion that you have towards leadership and goal setting.
Yeah. So, over the course, I've been a coach for a long time, and over the course of time have been increasingly interested specifically in the area of goal execution. Mm-hmm. Because although it seems like something that is simple, everybody knows what a goal is and how to set a goal. It's actually pretty complicated, and there's lots of pitfalls, and there's ways that it's harder than it looks, and also there are just a tremendous amount of impacts. It's a very powerful tool if wielded correctly. I don't know if you know, but actually there's, over the last 100 years, there's been about 1,000 studies on goals and goal setting.
Mm-hmm. I did not know that.
It is one of the most well-studied and well-established ways of intervening and driving performance from ourselves and from the people that we work with and serve as leaders. But it remains to be elusive for many of us in terms of how to actually use it. And part of the reason is because people have had bad experiences with goals and goal setting even, right? Because it turns out that goals are strong medicine. They're not over the counter. They're prescription medication that have to be done in such a way that is empowering and not disempowering. So if done right, they're super powerful. If done wrong, they're super powerful also, and sometimes in negative ways, right? And so, anyway, it's very interesting. It's the field of interest that has kind of caught my attention, and we've built a platform around it, and also just journeyed with lots of clients on this, and have been documenting that journey and trying to get the word out about the good and the bad of goals and goal setting, and also the habits of execution. So that's kind of what I think about most of the time as a business professional, anyway.
Understood. And I really enjoyed your picturesque description around goal setting being medicine, and realizing the fact that many of us as professionals, regardless of our tenure, experience, etc., we've all had good and or poor experiences to goals. And so in your experience and understanding what's going on in best practices, Scott, what's kind of fired you up around the positives of goal setting, and what have you learned, I guess, in the past 5 years around the same?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the things that I notice when people take the time to set goals productively and properly is that it's a real relief. People feel immediate relief. I mean, there's still lots of work, and there's actually executing against the goal takes time and effort, but there's an immediate sense of relief, like, whew, I've been carrying about 15 possible things that I should be accomplishing in my mind, and I've settled on 2, and that feels much better. I know what to do with my day and my week and my month now, and before I just felt it pulled in all kinds of different directions and uncertain because I was keeping all the doors open. I hadn't decided. I hadn't made any choices. Now I've made some choices, and that feels better. So that's one immediate positive that people experience when they kind of have the courage to set a goal that actually delineates choices. And that's one of the things that often goes wrong with goals is it's something like hit $10 million in revenue, which, has no strategic content whatsoever. It's just a needle. But there's no kind of content about how we're going to move the needle. But you're asking about positives. I think the other thing that proper goal execution really helps with is it delineates or identifies the smaller wins that lead up to the bigger win. And so you get a feeling of accomplishment as you go. One of the real critiques of goals, right, is that they're demoralizing because you are failing until you succeed. You are not hitting the goal by definition until the end, until you achieve it. And so it's kind of counterproductive, and there's all kinds of anxieties and fears that can creep in. And so the counteraction to a proper chunking down process and goal execution process is also some relief because you feel you have evidence building up that you are making it, and that and you have the dopamine hits of checking things off towards that strategic goal instead of it just being this looming thing that you may or may not accomplish in the future. Those are a couple of the positives. Not to mention the way that it really helps teams rally around a couple of things that they're doing together. Instead of just being isolated and working at cross purposes, even because they haven't really communicated about what they're doing together.
I feel like you might be giving everybody too much credit, Scott. You mentioned, I think, having only a few goals, but I know at least in my own experience in the past, one of the challenges I have with goals is having way too many. Yeah. And I think you talked about, having these 2 goals that you work towards, or you had 50 in your head. Is that like what's been your experience with working with other people and coaching them? Have they come to the table and said, well, I had 50 in my head. Why don't I have 15 on paper? And yeah, sure, I can accomplish all these things. But then on the flip side, recognizing that just as humans, we're really poor at understanding how long something is actually going to take us. And it tends to take twice as long as we expect it to. And so we tend to fall short when we set too many goals. So I'm just curious about your experience around that.
Very similar. I mean, there's a great saying that, the first 90% of a project takes 90% of the work, and then the last 10% of the project takes the other 90% of the work. And so these things, this is classically the case, right? Is that we're, as humans, especially when we don't break things down into more granular planning, is that it's easy just to kind of make an intuitive assessment. Like, yeah, I think, a year is a long time. I think I can do those 15 things. I mean, we're not kind of confronted with our limits of space and time. And so, So definitely, everybody struggles with this, including me, who sees it all the time. It's not a cognitive. It's not kind of like a conceptually we understand, but in our hearts we still believe that we can do all 15. And so, there, as a coach, and you both have experienced this too. How to help somebody to come to terms with with what's possible. As coaches, right, we're supposed to be yeah, you can accomplish anything. You are a magical snowflake, and go out and do it, right? And of course, I said that kind of facetiously, but and it is true. Actually, people are incredible in terms of what they're able to accomplish. And yet there also there are these realities around what's possible in a given amount of time. And so it's an interesting experience to walk that line between because as coaches, actually, we don't know exactly what people can and cannot accomplish, right?
Exactly.
It surprises us often. It's not really our place to say you can't do that, because they maybe they can, but at the same time, we've seen it over and over again that 15 is a lot and it's unlikely. So I don't know if you both have any thoughts. How do you tackle that? If it's okay if I ask you a question,
yes,
as
of course.
what is your approach when you want to hold people as incredibly full of potential, and also you have this kind of background knowledge of what's likely?
Two things come up for me from a coach approach, and you have my attention, Scott, in the reverse questioning. I really enjoy this. Two things come up for me. One is asking the coaching client, what does great look like for you? And then asking, what is realistic success look like for you? Because those are two different things. Great meaning, how do I stretch myself? What are my audacious goals? If I wave that proverbial coaching magic wand, what does great look like? And then the second question is more so around, how can we realistically help you stretch, and how can we champion you and rally behind you to accomplish things that you will be proud of? And so I think it truly comes into two parts. From a performance perspective, the coach in me looks at it from realism. What's your top 4 to 5 things that you really want to accomplish this year by way of success measures? And then you don't have to stop there. I think for me, the biggest epiphany that I've had around goal setting or objective setting is that they're not a start and stop process. It's a constant journey, right? There's flow to it. And it's really important to get succinct on a few things. But even within those few things, we can stretch ourselves. So let's just say Ange accomplishes said goal of, building the business to X amount of consultants and coaches per year in Q3. Well, then my stretch goal is, does it make sense to add more? Are we there yet? And so stretching the way that we think about it. And then conversely, on the flip side of it, with regards to pandemic and everything that's been going on in the upheaval of the past 18 months, I've
heard of it. I'm not really sure what's going on. Yeah.
Good. I'm so glad. So glad you tuned in. Being able to pivot as well, right? So again, goals are not static, rather they're fluid, and being able to problem solve both from a positive and to potentially a negative is really important. And so a lot of conversations we've been having with clients over the past year is like, okay, so the way that we've done things is not the same. And if we can't accomplish goal A, how do we accomplish goal A.1? What does that look like? So it's getting people to think around tangibles and that things are still doable from a productive perspective.
Totally.
That's our take anyways.
Yeah. If I can maybe jump on it, and I appreciate the visionary aspect that you took towards it, Ange. I think it's fitting as well with the work that you do and your working style. I think I was looking at it a little bit differently, not necessarily differently, but if I can add to what you were saying.
Go for it.
One of the challenges that I've noticed, and I'll answer the question or I'll twist the question a little bit, is that I've noticed people compare themselves to their best self when setting goals and saying, well, I did this 1 year and I was able to do all these goals and I accomplished all these things. Why can't I do that now? And when we dive a little bit deeper, we find out that, well, their job was only part-time, or their environment was completely different. They didn't have kids at that time, or there's all these different factors within their life that was completely different. And yet they're comparing themselves to their best self, so to speak, at a time and place that was much different from where they are today. And so it's kind of taking that step back and saying, well, recognizing where you're at today, what looks realistic. I think that's what kind of leads into a little bit more about your second point there, Ange, about setting those realistic expectations, but also recognizing, well, how can you push yourself a little bit further without setting yourself up to fail?
And I think you raise a good point there, Scott, because what that's pointing to is when it comes to objective or goal setting, there's a huge mental game that's behind it. And Scott Ward, you've also alluded that too previously, in the sense of having, the medicine versus over the counter, right? So it's what's our mindset around goal setting in the first instance, or right now, or this year, or next year when we go to do it again. And I think that it's really important to have those pauses or those check-ins, almost like a micro needs assessment around that person's mental state or perceptions or beliefs around goal setting, so that you can calibrate and ensure that it's something that's sustainable. Because I think that's where there's a huge proponent of potential quote unquote failure. And I wouldn't say failure, I would say slippage in the sense of accomplishing goals, is when, our mindset isn't in alignment with the logistical or functional things that we're trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just to add to what you've both said, there's a few things that come to my mind as well in terms of strategies for helping people and ourselves and our teams to think about what's possible, and to kind of strike the balance between being aggressive and audacious, and also I don't love the word realistic, but that it's in the realm of possibility, right? We want it to be in the realm of possibility because it's quite, we don't want to finish a quarter or a year and say that we missed the goal. But it was impossible anyway. So, how could I have expected? It was a stretch goal that was not really something that we expected to hit. Well, come on. Then that's not that fun either, right? It takes away the joy of the chase if we're not expecting to hit it. So there's a couple of things that come to my mind. One is one way to, if you're talking to somebody, if one of your listeners is working with even a direct report or something who's setting their own goals, if they ask them to plan it out a little bit. Plan it out a little bit. Don't just state it, but plan what is all required in order to accomplish this, and work out the details a little bit more. That can really help, right? Because a lot of times what happens is you do that and you're like, and there's this part of this puzzle. And I'd have to wait for that to come into play. That's not going to, so this can really help to get a sense for what's a more realistic sense for what's possible. And what I recommend that people do is break things all the way down from the year to the quarter to the month, and then all the way down to the week, which leads to a very interesting way of measuring this as well, which is carrying capacity. So if somebody has 15 goals, sure, put them all in there, and then break them all down to the weekly level. And if you can move all 15 forward most weeks, then you can do 15 goals. But realistically, a hard, lofty, impactful yearly goal is going to take, 45, 47 weeks worth of progress, probably. You're not going to be able to do it in 5 weeks of progress to do a yearly goal, right? You're going to need to make progress almost every week. And so if we find that, 5 out of the 15 or 13 out of the 15 aren't getting any weekly love on a regular basis, then you can't do it. You should call it early, not later, and so there's a nice rule of thumb, which is not 100% accurate. That's why it's a rule of thumb and not a truth, is that if you don't have time this week, then you don't have time. Because what's going to be different next week? Not much. Or the week after that. If you don't have time this week, then you don't have time. And then the third idea is to ask people to say, okay, look, or again, this is ask ourselves. The nice thing about being coaches is that we always can turn these things on ourselves because we struggle with the same things that our clients do, right? So the other question is, or the other suggestion is, okay, great. That is awesome. Do 15 things this year. But you know what? Do them sequentially, not in parallel. Do the most important first. Hit it with all you got. And if you can do that in 4 weeks or 1 week or a quarter, do it as fast as you can, and then do the next thing, and then do the next thing. Don't do all in parallel. That way, you'll be accomplishing the things that you need to accomplish. And by golly, you might do all 15, or you might do, but at least they're stack ranked. If you instead of accomplishing none of them, because you did them all in parallel, they're all at 75%. And the thing, not all wins, not all goals are this way, but many are, that basically, in terms of value to the company and value to yourself, they're not valuable at all until they're done. So a goal that is 50% done or 75% done might as well not be done at all. This is not always true. But in many goals, this is the case. And so, insofar as so when that is true, it's really important to finish them. And so pay attention to those things. And yeah, anyway, that's another suggestion, is to do them sequentially instead of trying to do them in parallel.
I like your thought process around prioritization. Wanting to play devil's advocate, though, on like having that finish around the goals. I think that I believe that it's advantageous to want to finish something, and to finish something from a productivity perspective. From a mindset perspective, I'm curious to understand what your thought process is, Scott, around small wins. So when we're talking about breaking down that larger annual goal into our quarterly, and then into our monthly, and into our weekly, at what point do we look at the goal and be like, okay, you know what, I'm garnering progress on this? Like, how would you approach clients in helping them celebrate those small wins for consistency, right? Because we know that when it comes to goals, there's high failure rate, or abandonment rates, I should say, in the sense of, that longer sprint versus a short sprint.
Yeah, it's such a good question. And let me just make sure that I'm dialed in with what you're asking. I think what you're asking is, so there's a yes, no, kind of, did you hit the goal or not?
Yes.
But there's this case where, no, I didn't technically hit the goal as stated when I said I would do it, but I'm still very happy. A lot of good things happened, and I made a lot of progress. And actually, this was a fantastic year. And it feels weird to feel sad about this year just because I didn't hit my goals, because it was actually awesome. Is that the kind of the dynamic that we're
very much so.
Pressing on? Okay. Yeah. So I think that we really have to, you said something interesting about abandoned goals. And I think we really need to differentiate between, and this is one of the things about goal execution properly done, is that we need to attach to not just the completion of the goal, but also to how we engaged with it, and the level of intentionality and the discipline that we had around pursuing it. So, because it is very, very different. Let's just be clear, though. Actually, one thing that we need to be really clear about is that it is better to complete goals than not. We cannot lose that. We cannot lose that, right? We cannot. It is not a non-issue to not achieve what we said. That being said, it is not the only thing, and we're also, and you can. This is where goals go wrong, is that you can sacrifice too much. You can destroy other parts of your business or relationships or all manner of other things. Like, you should not accomplish goals at all cost. But we do not want to lose that it is that we do want to try to accomplish our goals as stated and when we said we would. However, the other part of that, it's wildly different to say, I didn't accomplish the goal, and but I have 50 weeks of progress. Like, I stuck with it, and I had this adversity and that adversity and this setback. And I started with plan A, then I went to plan B, then I went to plan C, then I went to plan D, and I kept, and I stuck with it. And this is the good things that came out of it. I didn't technically hit the goal. Overall, I'm holding my chin up, and I think I played a good game. Like, it was a good game. Didn't end up going my way, but I really wish that I won. But I'm not embarrassed about how I played the game. That is so different than saying, yeah, I missed the goal, and it's because I got distracted and I really didn't work on it that much.
Yeah.
Right. And so what we want to do as people who are supporting people who are setting goals is to watch for how they're this like tricky balance of intensity and hunger, but also celebrating celebrating the progress that was made and the effort and the level of engagement with the system. With there's a great saying by Scott Adams that losers have goals and winners have systems.
Trust the process.
Trust the process. Now, I think that's just a punchy simplification, probably the most accurate way. A better a way to think about it is probably winners have goals and systems, right? They have both. But the point, his point is valid, is that there's something really powerful, because you know what? If you play the game in this really deliberate and disciplined and engaged way, you're going to win next year or the year after that. Like, it bodes very well. Maybe you didn't win the championship this year, but it's going to go well ultimately. You can't control any given game. I'm using these sports metaphors. Not everybody resonates with that, but any given goal can slip through your fingers, but overall you're going to be okay. Exactly. As opposed to I forgot about that for a couple quarters, and then I kind of did this rush job at the end and I missed it. This is very different than what we're going for.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing, Scott, is paying attention to the individual's, patterns and their intentions and the types of conversations that are coming out of and wrapped around the goal setting, and having active real-time conversations is really important too. One thing that was coming up for me in the sense of our client scope is like in the tech space as well as the NGO space. You have funding phases, or you have donation phases or grant phases. And sometimes that can be a multi-year kind of journey or marathon. And so what you're saying really relates, I feel, in those aspects, because they could have been having to flex their resiliency muscles to get through funding hoops, or to ensure that there's consistent relationship building for funding and the same. And it may not come out or shake out exactly how they want it in this round or this phase, but they're substantially further along and still have another year or two to go with regards to that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, what that raises for me is this interesting dynamic with strategic goals around things that are in our control and things that are not in our control, and how to balance that, or how do you stay hungry and committed and going to plan A, B, C, and D, given the fact that not everything is in control. But not everything is something that we can directly do. Like a funding round, or other people are deciding on some of these things. It's not just our direct volition. I think that does that resonate for you as a kind of sometimes a sticky wicket for people? How do we maintain this like psychological balance of, okay, I'm really responsible for this, but I also can't just do it. How do I feel when a goal is accomplished or is not accomplished because somebody else decided that we didn't get the funding?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great question. Jump in, Scott. Go for it.
Yeah, no, I like the balance between like what's in my control, what's outside of my control around that. And there's one thing about goal setting that's kind of coming up for me, and I'd like to get your input on it. It's something that I don't know if we talk about very often, but it's after the goal. And, and what happens after you reach that goal. And I've seen it maybe more in like the fitness world or things like that, where people want to lose weight or go to a race or do something along those lines. And they take all this time, all this effort they put into being able to run a marathon or being able to, hit this goal. And then by hitting that goal, and now they haven't built up the process of exercising regularly, for example, because they had a goal they're going towards. Once the goal was over, everything else got pushed aside, or they stopped working towards it. Mm-hmm. How do you build up that habit of consistency? And what have you seen more in the business realm around maybe achieving goals and the cost of that?
Mm-hmm. I think the best kind of strategic goals are ones that once they're accomplished, they require nothing further from you, right? This is the ideal, is that basically you've taken it so far. And obviously that is not something that's as possible with fitness goals, because you can't really delegate that in the same way, right?
We can't, not yet.
Not yet, yeah. But ideally, so goals compound, strategic wins compound when there's something that we set up and launch, and then we no longer have to run them, right? They're delegated, and other people are taking the charge, or they're automated in some way, or that we've launched something and it now exists, and we can move on to the next thing and build on top of that. And so that's one answer to the question, is to try to take things to the point that it is the new status quo. Mm-hmm. Right. So part of the goal is not just hitting, and this is the problem with revenue goals actually, is that, I want to hit $10 million this year, but then there's nothing inherent in the goal to say that you're just not going to have to turn around and, as a company, do that again next year and do the same work. You have the same problems, and it takes the same amount of effort, as opposed to building out something that makes it that you hit the same amount of revenue, but with the way is smooth. For whatever reason, it's 50% easier. Well, man, I mean that makes it so that you're freed up to do a lot of other things and to work on the next thing. So. Scott, feel free to hit me with a follow-on question if that kind of dodges your original question in some way. But that's what came to my mind.
I like where you took it around the revenue goals, because I think that's really relevant in terms of, you'd mentioned, we want to hit $10 million this year. And in the back of your mind, you know that, when I hit that 10 million, I'm just going to do 15 the year after. And then that 15 the year after will likely look like 20 the year after that. And so it's just an ongoing goal that I'm a continuous rat race. And so the shift in perspective I'm hearing is rather, having that goal set up, but also taking into account, how much input or how much efforts are being put in to that output, and are they matching? And if you're able to create that $10 million with half the amount of effort, is that maybe worth more to you than putting in all your effort to reach that same goal? So I like the reframe around that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe the way to think about it is that, how do we make the same amount of money with less inputs forever, not just next year, but forever? How do we transform the very nature of how we operate, or what business we are in even, right? So if you think about, what is a strategic goal versus any other goal or any other activity? If you think about it on a couple of axes, you think about it in terms of the longevity of the impact, or the longevity, how long the thing lasts, short term versus long term, and then also the extremity of the impact, like how big of an impact is it? So, and you can kind of think about it in terms of quadrants. But if you have something that is, for example, like low impact and low and short term, it's things like answering this email and paying your taxes and all the things that basically they're going to not have much impact, and you're just going to have to do it again soon. I won't go through all the quadrants, but the one that's most interesting is the high impact and long term, right? So it's going to dramatically affect things, and it's going to last forever. That's where transformation really kicks in, because it raises the level permanently. This is what we're interested in, is the status quo is now at a new level. We've made a step change. And so now we can build from a new starting point next year. So if we're starting from the same place every single year, then it's kind of demoralizing, and takes a lot of, it's a grind.
For sure. Definitely. I know that we could, this topic's near and dear to both of our hearts. Well, all three of us, to say the least, but we'd like to ask you, Scott, what would be a few words of inspiration that you would want our subscribers to hear?
What I would say in terms of inspiration in this area is that if you've had an experience where, if you have a mixed feelings about goals, is the encouragement is to continue to engage with it because it's a super powerful way for you to make the progress that you want in your life and in your work. But just here's the thing to hold is that the set of habits and the mindsets and the ways to approach it are different than the general productivity habits that we learn about. And so invest some time in understanding the different mode that strategic work is versus general productivity. And it's the experience of doing strategic work and nailing strategic goals becomes much more pleasant when you use the right tools for the job. It can be fun. That's, it can be fun and it can be rewarding, and it can be not this kind of the stress inducing, oh my gosh, I'm already completely overwhelmed with all of the to-dos. And you want me to also be thinking about, this year and next year and doing strategic work on top of that. I'm barely hanging on with my current, just day-to-day work. The challenge and encouragement and inspiration is that it can be better, but you have to use the right tool for the job and not just assume that your current skill set can be efficiently or can be productively applied to this different way of working, which is strategic work. It takes different mindsets and different tools.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We've really enjoyed your insights around goal setting and the mindsets that are associated with it.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure to be here. I'm a fan of Intuity, what you're both up to. You talk about the whole person performance. I love that. I think that we need more people like both of you thinking about how to help people in this holistic way, and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much. And one last question for you, Scott. Where could our subscribers find you? Where's the best place?
The best place is a website called HabitStack.com. Habits like good habits and bad habits, stack like a stack of papers, HabitStack.com.
Fantastic. And for those who would like to learn more about HabitStack itself, we're also going to provide a link to the company's profile on the Elevate Business Podcast page. Take good care. Thanks for listening to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm glad you could join us. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay updated with our latest content, make sure to visit our website. The link can be found in the episode description, where you can subscribe to the podcast, sign up for our newsletter, and learn more about our whole person leadership services. Sounds interesting? Explore the Whole Person Leadership Cohort by Intuity Performance, a unique program that offers unparalleled support to managers on every step of their leadership journey. Our program features evidence-based assessments, workbooks, group coaching, and interactive learning experiences to help you level up your leadership skills. Reach out today to apply to one of our upcoming cohorts. Until next time, take care and stay curious.